Alright people, and welcome to Rauta. This is going back to my record collection, a video series which I started already a few months ago. Then during the summer didn't really have the time to go through my recordings, and now with this fly accompanying me here, very enthusiastic about the letter C. Let's go through that. Mind you, the pile is not very big. I can actually show it to you. There are way more albums starting, or bands starting with B in my collection than this small pile of C. It's a curious thing, but really easy to explain. First of all, with B, you have Bathory, you have Burzum, you have Bolt Thrower, some of my favorite bands. So with these three bands alone, you can just get a big kind of a discography, even though I like maybe half of Burzum stuff. But with full Bathory, well, not actually full, I'm lying here, there are bad albums too. But let's say 2/3 of Bathory, full Bolt Thrower, you know how it goes. Makes the stack this big, all along with three bands, and then some other bands. Anyway, enough ranting. I put this in alphabetical order, so I'll go quickly through what these bands are like, what these albums are like, but not like doing full reviews, just showing what I have, because people were asking me, what is your, record collection like? And I like to do it letter by letter, with the exception of X and Y and whatever when we get that far, because it's going to be very few in those letters. But C is enough for one video. Now, this is a surprise title, Cannibal Corpse. Never actually figured out like a kind of a joke band, because this is joke about weeds and death metal. Well, weed and death metal. But their wordplays are fun. I mean, left-hand pass versus left-hand path. And so forth. There are plenty of those. Just take a look at these track lists here, and you will see a lot of death metal references. Nug So Wild. Of course, a weed reference to None So Wild. Or Blunt Force Down. Whatever, blasphemy made high, blasphemy made flesh. So whether we're talking about the Cannibal Corpses, or Morbid Angels, or Entombs, or Cryptopsy, there are plenty of figures. But what matters most is that, in fact, I like this. This is a very good, say, Cannibal Corpse worship band. Some would say clone, but I always end up having this discussion, whether something is a clone or, a worship band. That is just a way that you either go for, like, that band is a Bathory worship band, like it's war metal worship band, it's gonna be good, because worship kind of indicates they're, like worshipping, like doing a really an homage to a certain band, whereas you're going to call it clone or copycat, or it's like, yeah, they're version copycat, they don't do good stuff. What matters to me is, like, if you have a good band, and if you try to follow those steps, it doesn't matter if it's a worship, clone, copycat, whatever you want to call it, because what matters is if the music is good. And I'll give you a good example. Darkthrone, Panzerfrost. It's the perfect Celtic Frost worship band. Or album, that is. Anyway, let's go, move on. So, Cannibal Corpse is a band that I started listening in the 90s, but never made that big with me. And that is the reason why I only have these newer ones here. Why? Because back in the 90s, I kind of figured it's probably not as good that I really need it on CD. So at some point, even when I got review copies and all, I kind of decided, yeah, it's not gonna do thing for me. Then at some point, 2000s, I started missing certain albums by them. And I kind of, I didn't forget, of course, the existence of Cannibal Corpse. But, I wasn't following it actively. Around 2017, I decided, let's do a full Cannibal Corpse discography run. And then it really hit me. Man, there are actually more good albums on the whole discography than I remembered. And I like, okay, I gotta get back to it. And earlier this year, when I was doing my Cannibal Corpse retrospective video, I went this whole discography, I think, like 2 times and 10 some, reading all the lyrics and all that stuff. And then it's really clicking, like, certain albums I still need to add to my discography. So why I have these newer ones? Because it was basically Red Before Black that kind of triggered me to do the discography run back in 2017. And since the albums I've gotten for review whatnot are something that I've decided to put in my collection. And for what it's worth, repetition, Violence Unimagined is my favorite Cannibal Corpse album. It's all pretty consistent, but you can talk about that in my Cannibal Corpse retrospective video. Let's not waste our time here. Then it comes a very, very divided attention kind of album, Carcass Heartwork. As you can see, this is a reissue, and I had the original one back in the days, but the reason why I wanted to replace it later on is this selection of bonus tracks. This is Her Life and Rock and Roll. They were released on EP, which I had, and they are some of the really greatest tracks by Carcass, in my opinion. So I wanted to get this one, and because I sold the EP back in the days. Now people are asking, why don't you have more Carcass albums? Well, I was never a big grind fan. Some people are going to say, boo, you don't understand the early albums. Yeah, grind never was my thing. Much like death metal is not a big thing for certain people in black metal scene or thrash metal, whatever. Carcass for me peaked with this album, and I think it's partially because, Amot's guitar work. This is basically the pre-work before he went on to Arch Enemy and all that stuff. He just managed to push all the right buttons when it comes to magnificent guitar leads, guitar melodies, and all that stuff. Don't get me wrong, Necroticism is actually a good Carcass album too, but eventually I kind of got bored and, sold it. So this is the only one I still get stuck to. It's a 9 out of 10 album for me, and it's a special one. Then there's another weird one album thing for me, and it's Carpian Forest. Don't get me wrong, Carpian Forest has other good albums as well, but let's be honest about it. Most of those albums didn't really that much mean to me. Certain did more than others, but I don't know. Eventually I got rid of them. But this is the one that I kind of decided to keep. Strange Old Brew, because it's the best. Probably the best anyway. I don't find any other reason why I would have it in my collection. And I've done the discography run a couple of times throughout the years, so no need for repetition. Then comes a weird underground jewel or gem. I don't know if this is that good of an album really, but I am keeping it because look at the label, Serpent's Eye. This is my old address, old email, old whatever you have. My own label, and the very first release back in early 2000s when I released. Mind you, I only released a couple of albums. This was the first one. This was originally demo material sent to me for review early 2000s. I figured to contact the guys. I wanted to, release it. And because I love, digipacks, I went for digipack. And I didn't sell many of these. I'm a lazy salesman, to be honest. It's the same thing going on with Rauta. I'm lazy selling ads, lazy, advertising myself. I didn't really want to do that. But I wanted to release music. And this is good raw end of black metal from Finland. So decided to be released, in my opinion. That's why it's here in my collection. Then a couple of curiosities from a non-metal side. This one is called. This is actually an artist. I might have more albums if I ever venture later on to later parts of discography. But what started with me was Crucible. And then I decided to get, Hidden, as well as the collection Golden Epiphany. The thing here is with this one is how I was advertised back in the days when I got into dark ambient early 2000s, late 90s, probably early 2000s. His call was mentioned to me as like, this is music as if a god were talking to the artist. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe in a Christian god or whatever god. I don't believe in any of the gods, but got me fascinating. If someone is making this dark ambient, I mean, it's really dark and kind of sinister too, and that is the result of God talking to you. Man, I want to meet this God. It's going to be one fierce devil, demon, whatever. But yeah, Cole is one of my favorite dark ambient acts. Often overlooked. I mean, dark ambient isn't the sexiest of genres, and these artists are not that known. We're not here talking about Lustmord and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, Cole is fantastic. If you like dark ambient, you should check it out. And, when God talks to you in this dark nature, man, you're in for a ride. Obviously, my favorite Celtic Frost, and the only one I figured I need owning, is Morbid Tales. The funny thing is, I heard Dark Throne back in the days, way before I heard Celtic Frost. So when I heard out Morbid Tales, it suddenly clicked me. This was probably early 2000s, I think. Might have been late 90s, probably early 2000s. And then it clicked. Morbid Tales and Panzerfaust. It's like Celtic Frost made a baby, Nobody knows who the mother is, but there it is. The DNA is the same. And old school black metal, that is something that nowadays kids probably don't understand or like. It's too trashy. It's or this or that. It's too pioneer. But then again, who I am to blame? I never cared that much for, old Black Sabbath. They are pioneers of metal and doom metal and heavy metal and all, but never made much of an impact for me. So maybe this is exactly the same reason why kids of nowadays don't give a damn about the Bathories and Celtic Frost and what have you early days, Venoms. But Morbid Tales, special album for me, has inspired me a lot. Then is the one band in this particular letter, what I was referring to Bathorian version with the letter B. And this is, hold on, Clandestine Blaze. So not everything here, but most Clandestine Blaze. Then I also have some tapes which are visible right here, like Blood and Cum, and those early not demo tapes, but tape releases. So not gonna go through them all very specifically here, but just showing what I have for Clandestine Blaze. This early album, back in the days when I got to know Mikko Aspo from Northern Heritage and Clandestine Blaze, got me into that raw black metal, not like Dark Throne, but in a way also very Finnish takeoff from the same genre, Finnish Dark Throne, if you will. So always making raw, kind of unpolished black metal, aggressive in a way, but not the fastest band. Definitely not the most sophisticated band. Quite the opposite from that. You're gonna see it. I put it in the right way so they end up in my collection properly. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing here because Clandestine Blaze always clicked me, but not like 5 out of 5 fashion. My point here is, I don't even remember which album I'm missing, 1 or 2. Anyway, all the albums click me in quite a different, but yet the similar ways. Meaning, it's the raw ending of black metal with the rather inhuman vocals, certain lyrical aspects. And the way is that it's very, very different from, typical Finnish black metal. Typical Finnish black metal, you're thinking about Horna, you're thinking about, Satanic War Master, you're thinking about Behexen, Sargeist, and the like. They're coming from one of the same tree or garden. Clandestine Blaze is different, much like, Beherit is very different, or Archcode is very different from your typical black metal bands, or Impel Measurement for that matter. But there are lots of bands which go the kind of a, I wouldn't call it melancholic, but the kind of a 1990s Nordic style black metal, and the ones that I listed. And Clandestine Blaze is different. And that probably is one of the reasons why it clicks so well with me. Like I said, solid discography, much like, Horna in a way that there's not like style changes, there are no quality changes that much, but always a solid band. Then, one of these one-time thing for me, Cocytus with this album, which is dark ambient. Not the most memorable in style, but when early 2000s I started, buying and trading them, this was one of the albums, and while I gave it, a listen, another one after so many years, still feeling like the magic is right there. Much like Call, I should totally dive deeper into that one and, figure out if there are more albums that I need. And Dark Ambient, mind you, is way more underground when you go for the streaming services. You probably have, it has probably happened to you if you use streaming services. That you go for, your Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and you're like, okay, I want to listen to this album. Oh man, it's not there. Happens with bands like Behexen. Happened, by the way, with bands like Dismember even a few years ago. So you're like, okay, then I go for YouTube. At least YouTube has all the cool black metal cult demos and all that stuff. Recently been listening to Barathrum discography, and you can't really find the ones that it wasn't even released, weren't released on CD or whatever. But, someone ripped those tapes and whatnot and put them on internet. Thanks gods of metal for that. But when it comes to dark ambient, there are lots of gaps. Sometimes I'm looking for my favorite albums, like when I was visiting a friend and decided I cannot play this cool dark ambient for them, and I couldn't find it. And I was like, if only I was at home, I could spin the CD for them. So when you think black metal bands are cult, marginal, and all that stuff, but you can find them YouTube, think again. There is always a deeper level of underground, which is something you don't just go away with 2 clicks more. And certain bands. I'm not sure if this is one of them, but I have some CDs in my collection for future episodes, and we can talk about that. Then a couple of my favorite soundtrack albums of some of my favorite movies. Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. These were the movies I saw as a kid, and as I'm already interested in fantasy, I was becoming a role player later on. These made the similar impact for me as Star Wars as a kid. So while Star Wars is fantasy set in space, soap opera, and not so much sci-fi, if you know what I mean, this is exactly the kind of high fantasy thing. You have the monsters, you have the magic, and of course you have swords and muscles and babes. Conan movie, especially the first one, really fucking golden. But then again, I always liked Destroyer kind of equally. Just a little bit different, and this shifted along the years. As a kid, Destroyer was probably cooler because it was more Indiana Jones, if you know what I mean, in a way, that was more adventure in a way. Whereas Conan the Barbarian is more like a origin story, telling the story how Conan came to be, and of course there is this adventure and epic battles, and maybe not epic is that the right word, but cool battles, let's put it this way, and a really, really cool movie villain. Rip James Earl Jones, by the way, for his roles as Thulsa Doom and Darth Vader. So two top-notch villains of all time, and of course Arnold Schwarzenegger with his muscles and physicality, the athleticism, man. And of course the Basil Polidori's music, mind-blowing. One of the best soundtracks ever made, if not the best. Then another favorite from Sweden. I say another favorite because I mentioned Bathory already, and Arcanum would be there, with Bathory as the second one. But one of my all-time favorites, even more so than, bands like Marduk and all, Kraft. Especially these three first albums are the ones that made me impact. This is the kind of a Swedish Dark Throne. Yes, there is Armageddon also, which is kind of a borderline the same. But Kraft made a big impact. Must have been early 2000s. I'm pretty sure of that. With the albums like, what do you have here? Total Soul Rape, Terror Propaganda, and especially Fuck the Universe. I don't know why that is even better than the first ones. Well, I do, but, sometimes it's hard to put into words. But all these kind of judge the right, raw ways what, Dark Throne were doing with, Transylvanian Hungers, Under the Funeral Moon, Panzerfaust. But, of course, these are kind of a slow tempo, raw vocals, raw production, and just the kind of riffs that get under my skin. I really love it. But Dark Throne is better. Then one of the weird CDRs I have a collection and decided to keep it. I mean, this is part of the cleaning process, me going through my discography and, trimming the fat off. I'm trying to get less CDs. Some people go the other direction, collecting. I'm like uncollecting, decollecting. Can you call it that? Anyway, here it is. And Crimson Evenfall, the predecessor of legendary Kaldak from Finland, Musta Surma. As you can see, this is CDR, but there is no other CD version. These are demos 96, 97, and this is some overlooked, I wouldn't even say underrated, because most people probably don't know Crimson Evenfall. Not a great name. I think Musta Surma is a lot better, meaning Black Death. Crimson Evenfall, however, made some cool black metal tracks back in the days. I know the guys, at least the other gun, when I load a little bit better. And they made some good black metal, but however, they never made it to an album, which is a shame, because it could, in my opinion, when we're talking about musical qualities, they could easily, challenge bands like Horna, challenge bands like Sargeist, and so forth. And they are good black metal overall. And man, I hope someday we will see Musta Surma album before the guys are too old. I mean, it's 50 plus already, so you never know. The last, and not least, in my collection for C is one of my favorite kung fu movies of all times, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Obviously, good movie doesn't mean good music, but this soundtrack by Tan Dum is in fact touching some weird right places, much like the movie Hero, and maybe House of the Flying Daggers. At least Hero. I don't remember how the music was in House of the Flying Daggers, but I mean, people who don't know, I've been practicing Kung Fu since 2000 onwards. Did that for about 8 years, 2 different styles. full contact and all. So obviously I was very much into kung fu movies as well, and that was even before, I mean when I was an adult, as a kid, ninja movies back in the 80s, Karate Kid and all that stuff. So they made the impact. Later on I wanted to do karate back in the 90s, and then I restarted my martial arts career, if you can call it that, in 2000. And this time it was kung fu. And of course, that kind of sparked the enthusiasm for, be it Jackie Chan movies or Jet Li, or like with Crouching Tiger when it came to the movies. I had to go to the cinema to see it. And fantastic. It's a beautiful story with some ace combat. And some people are like, yeah, but there are those flying fighters and whatever. Like, it's not natural. It's not realistic. Well, Star Wars and Conan are realistic. What the fuck, man? Like, I don't care. It's a Chinese fantasy, if you will. Wuxia. And this Kung Fu thing, I mean, it's a really something special for me. I don't expect people to understand it. It's like explaining video games to someone who doesn't play or who doesn't experience them. Or trying to explain any kind of a geekery. It's time to, when you're trying to explain black metal to someone who doesn't listen to metal, why are you fascinated by this marginal, weird way of creativity and artistry and all? And I'm like, well, I could give you a lecture, but you're not willing to listen. And for me, these Kung Fu movies are magical. I'm not saying everything is magical. Bruce Lee had like mediocrity among his movies. As great martial artist and even actor he was. But these certain movies, they're not just great as movies as in terms of aesthetics, but also because they are musically and, they artistically in so many layers, they're great. Beat the fights, beat the stories, or beat the beautiful aesthetics and the music. And this is why Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it kind of I'm not really prone to nostalgia, let's put it this way. But this, when I'm listening to it, it kind of takes me back. More than 20 years when I saw it in the movies, and I was like, man, this is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. And listening to that, it takes me to different places. It's almost like I'm mentally traveling to Asia, seeing these bamboo trees and these cool buildings and all that stuff. So it's very, very different than me listening to Nordic black metal being in the Nordic countries. So there's that. But like I said, I'm not gonna trying to force feed you any of this. This is just showing what I have in my collection. So it's a combination of soundtracks, dark ambient, and of course black metal. Curiously, not that much death metal in letter C, apart from the Cannibal Corpse albums. One Carcass, one Cannibal Corpse. And I know I should get more Cannibal Corpse albums as well. But anyway, this is letter C and still made it for 20 minutes. Man, I'm slow with these videos. But I want to tell you the stories, why these albums are meaningful for me, what made the impact. For example, the Carcass Heartwork. That was because Headbangers Ball in around, say, 1994. So back in the days when you didn't have internet, you didn't have Spotify, you didn't have YouTube or whatever, you just go for Headbangers Ball, what they have to offer. Okay, there's a new Pantera video, a new Bolt Thrower, new Carcass. What is this band? I haven't heard it. Or maybe you got some albums from your friends to like listen to this and return to me while you're done with it. Copy if you need to. That was the 90s. So different, so much harder to find these cool bands. But once you did, mind blowing. Anyway, off you go. Letter D next time. Currently listening to the Dark Throne albums. It's right. So let's get back to letter D, which is bigger than letter C, and let's make it 1 hour video. Oh, I'm kidding. Now, off you go. If you have questions or comments about this given albums or my small collection of C's, let it be heard. Give your comments. What do you like? What should I have? I'm missing here, and so forth. Let me know. And see you soon with more videos coming your way.